Hey there, beautiful humans, and welcome back to the Ryan Magic Show. In this episode, I'm going to be covering what I perceive to be one of the most important topics to address in this whole personal development space right now, in this whole society of growth and in the changing world that we're in, and that is the shame epidemic. The shame epidemic. And this topic is going to relate to you as a participant of planet Earth. Doesn't matter where you are, you're affected by this, and everyone you know is affected by this. But it's a little bit in the closet at the moment for even those that are really into personal development. And so I'm going to be covering this topic in depth. I'm going to be talking about a random spectrum of different elements of what shame is, what creates shame, how to solve it, the opportunity that exists for you, why we do certain behaviors, and how shame relates to that, how trauma relates to that, how our self-worth relates to that, how we present ourselves to the world in relation to this. It is a huge topic to cover, and you will be so much more self-aware off the back end of this episode if you go deep with it and give yourself permission to be open to what I'm sharing here. So before we getting into it, 2 weekends ago, I ran my signature workshop, the Art of Courage workshop. It was one of the most beautiful facilitation experiences that I've ever been a part of. It is my favorite thing in the world to teach, which is a series of models, principles, and practices and experiences that all pertain to fear. The only thing that blocks us from living our best life meaning actualizing all our dreams, being on purpose, financial freedom, deep connection, emotional healing, being with our soulmate, or experiencing deep intimacy and love. And they all of these things come back down to our capacity to address the things that scare us most. That is what our whole mind, that's why we want to do certain things, but we just can't get ourselves to do them. We have all these things that we know that we want to experience in the world. Why aren't we experiencing them? Most people's dreams have a series of steps that people know they could take, but they don't do them. Most people know how they want to show up in a relationship, but can't show up that way. Most people know the sort of person they want to be with, but they can't attract them. Why is it all so simple and obvious, but then so difficult at the same time? It's simple, but not easy to actualize our dream life. The reason why is fear. And I've spent the last 15 years in personal development, learning everything I can about deep emotional work, more practical empowerment, personal development, like Tony Robbins stuff and NLP. I've done a bunch of spiritual practices and meditation and plant medicine, and somatic healing, emotional release work, trauma work, inner child work, all these different sorts of therapies, and gone out there and practically learn how to talk to women, learn how to do tantra, learn how to be as healthy as I can, learn how to and build a multi-million-dollar business, worked on my posture, all these things, but they're very contradictory in nature. I didn't understand how they all fit together. And it perplexed me, it frustrated me, and it caused a lot of disarray in my experience of life. And so I put together a whole solution to this, and I realized that everything that is underpinned by fear. It's what blocks us and stops us. And the Art of Courage workshop, all my genius and experience and wisdom goes into facilitating a hardcore experience of how to address fear, how to navigate that. And the word is courage. That's how we navigate it. But how does it all tie together? How does it integrate? Well, that's what the experience is about. Big I'm pre-framing all of that because if you're listening to this and you want to grow and develop and live your best life and you enjoy my content and haven't been to the Art of Courage yet, I'm running another workshop in person, because that's where the magic happens, in February next year. So if you're interested in that, just email me, ryan@ryanmagic.com, or message me at @theryanmagic on Instagram, or go to ryanmagic.com and you can find out more information. But just hit me up personally and I'll give you an honest reflection on how I feel that the workshop could fit into where you are in life. But please reach out. It's the way that I can be of greatest service to you, and it's really affordable. So hit me up on that. Anyway, let's get into the episode. Shame. Shame couldn't be more practically explained as embarrassment. The feeling of being embarrassed. If a little kid feels embarrassed and they hide their face from the world, that act of hiding from the world is because I'm embarrassed of what has happened. I'm embarrassed of what I've done. And when we're young and we're developing, being given feedback and being healthily disciplined is a teaching tool. It's how kids learn what is and isn't appropriate within social norms of society. So if there's a kid that shits in his hand and like a monkey throws it at someone's face and he doesn't get told that that's not okay, then he hasn't been given the embarrassment or healthy level of shame. That's the healthy utility of shame. When someone does something that isn't acceptable within what we decide as a culture isn't acceptable, then that's the opportunity for shame to be functional, practical, and supportive. The problem is that most people go through life and at a young age actually don't learn that certain behaviors can warrant embarrassment, healthy embarrassment or shame, but learned that they as a person, not the behaviors they've done, but they as a person are embarrassing or shameful, and they adopt an identity of being shame. It's not a conscious thing, but it's a body experience, a bodily and a mental experience. And that is called toxic shame. A really great book to go deep on shame is a book, I think it's James Bradshaw, but the book's called Healing the Shame That Binds You. Healing the Shame That Binds You. It's a powerful book. I read it a long time ago and I reread it still a long time ago, but it's been on my shelf for a long time. And the principles that underpin it, very, very interesting. And so essentially, shame as an emotion is an experience when there's judgment present. And so what happens is people that are not seen, heard, or celebrated for who they are, or undergo intense trauma in childhood, which most of society go through, can cultivate this belief system and identity that they themselves are shameful and they have a shame identity. That is toxic shame, not healthy shame of redirecting behavior, but actually believing that there's something wrong with me. And this usually happens through traumatic experiences. So if someone gets yelled at a lot when they're a kid and there's emotional abuse or neglect in that form, that can cause toxic shame. What have I done to be worthy of this? There's obviously something wrong with me. If someone has something really intense happen to them, like they get a really bad disability, or they have some sexual abuse, or they get physically disciplined and have some physical abuse, oftentimes that person through that trauma will cultivate the feeling of, well, there's something wrong with me. And when I say feeling of, that's because what happens is that person then has a nervous system experience of feeling like they're in fight or flight as a steady state. It's not a conscious thing, but they are worried in nature because they feel like there's inherently something wrong with them. And that plagues their physical experience of life. Their body just feels stressed and tight, and they feel anxious as a very common experience, as a consistent experience of their life, because they think there's something wrong with them. And if someone feels like something's wrong with them, that goes against what we as a human species need to feel safe. Because the thing that creates safeties for us as humans is other people. It's one of the biggest aspects that creates a sense of safety. As mammals are any animal species that rely on a group of fellow animals to be safe and protected. So schools of fish. Any animal that relies on a group for protection is a mammal and has aspects of the way that they show up to life that programs them to fit in. And as humans, the way that we do that is by needing to know that we belong. And so when someone believes that there's something wrong with them, that safety that comes from feeling a sense of belonging, I belong in this tribe. Because if we're living in nature, if we're living in the wild, we need the tribe to survive. We physically need it. We need people to build things. We need people to gather things. We need people to hunt things. We need multiple people to protect from certain animals. And it's the numbers that creates the safety. And so that's different to a lot of other species. Like tigers aren't pack animals. Tigers are solitary creatures, so they can survive by themselves. We aren't. We need people. And so if our sense of belonging is threatened because we believe there's something wrong with us inherently, then we walk around not feeling safe, aka feeling hypervigilant, aka our nervous system being dysregulated in our sympathetic nervous system in fight or flight. And that's why shame is a problem, because our experience of life is massively threatened. Now, I'm going to be hitting off a lot of pieces around shame and flowing through lots of different theory and important things to consider with it. But the way that we can think about someone who has shame is if someone feels like not only their behavior that they did was embarrassing, but they are embarrassing, then those people walk around feeling like there is inherently something wrong with them. And that means that they are literally as a baseline. And how do I know this? I grew up with toxic shame. There's a lot of abuse in the house that I grew up in, a lot of yelling, a lot of drug abuse, a lot of mental health issues with both of my parents, abandonment issues, emotional neglect, emotional abuse. There was a lot of things that happened to me that had me grow up feeling what I'm about to stress, which is the symptom or the way that you can identify toxic shame, which is hidden. It's hidden. It's not obvious. People don't walk around going, this is what's happening to me. I've got toxic shame. I think there's something wrong with me. It's hidden away. Because the way to identify it is that someone inherently feels less than human. Someone has toxic shame, which if you're listening to this, there's a chance you do, because most people that, in my experience, that have been drawn to personal development, spiritual development, the emotional healing work, the personal development world, are called into this space to heal because they feel that there is something inherently wrong with them and they're always trying to change themselves. And so usually, like just from my vast experience of coaching thousands of people and facilitating thousands of people, it's that they get into this space, they believe there's something wrong with them. And they believe that they are less than human. And if someone believes that they're less than human, usually what they do is, because they're feeling worse than, is that the only way to seek relief from that, well, there's two ways, but one of the main ways is I either accept that there's something wrong with me, which is very painful, because again, it means accepting that one is not safe. Because if there is something wrong with them and they don't belong, then they're not protected by other people because there's something wrong with them. That's why we're so wired to fit in. That's why we're so wired to be liked. That's why status and social media play on our psychology so hard. Because if we are disliked or judged or rejected, then we may be abandoned. And if we get exiled from the tribe, from our psychology's perspective, because our brain was designed to live in the wild, that's how it developed, and that's the way it's still wired. We're in a completely different setting in modern society to the way we were designed to be in. If we are going to get judged, rejected, then our brain stimulates all this stress response, all this fear, all this, oh my gosh, my survival's under threat because I need to be liked. And if I get exiled from the tribe, which is what our brain's thinking is going to happen, even though we're not living in tribes, but our brain thinks we are, and our brain thinks if we get exiled from the tribe, we're not liked, we get rejected, we get abandoned, we get exiled from the tribe, that means death in the wild, because we need people for survival. We need other people for safety. That explains why we pretty much do everything as a species. It's to try to be liked. It's to try to be loved. It's to try to fit in. And what used to happen is that it was way easier to fit in the past because there was a set of tribal norms. There was a traditions and customs and culture that everyone did. Yeah, everyone had it. And if you're living in a 30 to 50 person, 20 to 50 person tribe, they tell you what to like. For the men, you go out and you become a good hunter. Cool. That's what you do. So you get good at it and then you fit in and it's fine. And there's a fire and there's a ceremony, you tell stories. You gather food, you play your role, you leverage your strengths, but the belief systems of the origin stories and what life's about, everyone believes the same stuff within that tribe. Whereas in our multifaceted, complex, globalized, multicultural societies, it's not as easy to get that feeling of safety, of fitting in, because instead of being in a 20 to 50 person tribe where everyone's feeling and believing the same things, we've got a million different options. And so we find ourselves in this situation where meeting the bare minimum requirement of feeling like we belong is much more difficult and much more complex. And so many of us are so much more innovative and creative, and we have so much more freedom, like possibility for freedom in different ways and unique expression. But the inherent safety that's programmed into our nervous system is getting threatened and challenged because our sense of belonging is being threatened and challenged. So this is an epidemic. This is a global problem, but it's not the main cause of the problem. Trauma is, and I'm going to talk about that in a moment. But just to come back to that point, if someone's got toxic shame, which I'm just going to say you probably do if you're in this space. I do. I grew up thinking there's something wrong with me. And I thought that I was worse than human, less than human, and tried to be more than human, superhuman. Thought I was worse than people, so I tried to be better than people because that's how I get relief. I'm going to try to be better than people, and that's the only way I can feel good enough. That's the only way I can find a sense of belonging. But the problem is that if someone is feeling inherently less than human, and they need to try to be superhuman, even if they manage that feat, which I did. I tried. The reason I worked 100 hours a week for 7 years straight was so that I could be superhuman and achieve all these wild things, not because I loved myself so much, because I didn't feel like I belonged so much and I thought everyone's going to like me. This is not what I was consciously thinking, but this is what was driving it. Everyone's going to like me if I become really successful. But then by becoming really successful, I was still driven by fear. I was still feeling separate and creating more separation. So then when I got all the success and I'm like, yes, this is going to feel so good. I'm going to feel like I've escaped this reality of feeling less than by actually succeeding at a high level. But what did I find and realize? Loneliness. Got to the top, quote unquote, and I've never felt so alone in my life. And so toxic shame is inescapable in using external strategies and behaviors. You can't fix or support shame by outrunning it or shifting the external reality. It's an internal game. All right, that's laying some of the foundation of what is shame. It's when we feel less than, and we go, the symptom of it, the problem with it is that it causes a lot of internal pain. We feel separation. Our feeling of belonging is challenged, and therefore we feel unsafe because we need to belong for safety. And so we go into hypervigilance. But like I said, toxic shame is often created by trauma. And that trauma tells us, well, because as kids, our survival is based on our parents. So we need to pedestal our parents to trust that we're safe. If we're a kid and we don't believe our parents are right, we don't believe our parents know what they're doing, we believe there's something wrong with our parents, that idea threatens our very survival. So kids don't know how to conceive that as a possibility. Even if consciously they can see there's some dysfunction. So I grew up with a drug abusive dad, drug dealer dad with all these dysfunctions, really manipulative and controlling to my mom and abusive to my mom, really unhealthy, super unhealthy mental health issues, all these things. But he was still my hero, still pedestaled him and looked up to him like he was the star of the universe. He wasn't though, but I couldn't see that as a kid because I need to believe, and all kids are programmed to pedestal their parents. Even if they punish them, even if they abuse them, we still look up our parents because we have to. So if shit goes wrong and trauma happens and we have these unhealthy experiences, even if it's emotional neglect and we're just not seen in our emotions and honored for who we are, the trauma of that is internalized because we have to take it on. We have to think there's something wrong with us, because if we think there's something wrong with our parents, the inherent presupposition there is I'm not safe because there's something wrong with my parents and they're meant to protect me. And if there's something wrong with them, they can't protect me and I might die. So I can't believe that there's something wrong with them. It just can't compute for me, because I have to trust that they're going to protect me. I have to trust that they're the bee's knees. I have to trust that they're all good and there's something wrong with me. And so kids inherent and internalize trauma. That's why so many, because I never understood as a kid, if someone's parents separate, which happened to my parents, they separated, my mom left my dad. And whenever someone would say, just know it's not your fault, but then kids would so often think it's their fault. It didn't make sense. I was like, how could a kid think it was their fault if their parents broke up? But it's a thing. Most kids whose parents broke up, or pretty much every kid, makes it mean that it's their fault, or they must have stuffed up, and that's why mom left, that's why dad left, that's why my parents separated. That doesn't make any logical sense. Why would that have anything to do with that? The only way it makes sense is understanding that we have to internalize things as kids, because we can't threaten the superstardom pedestaling that we give to our parents, because we need to know that they can protect us. Okay, I've thoroughly explained that now. So we internalize it. We internalize the trauma. And what I want to say about trauma is we're in this really interesting time in the world where I said before, I'm just going to preframe something. I said before that the only way to escape the pain of feeling like there's something wrong with us, or being less than human as someone with toxic shame, the only way to escape the pain of that is to try to become superhuman. I feel less than human, so I'm going to try to be superhuman. That's why most businessmen and women that are really successful are deeply insecure, because what drove the success was insecurity. Their life's not better with all that. That's why so many celebrities are successful. And it's not that they're all bad, though they're inherently wrong or they're bad at all. It's just that they're not coming from a place of love with a lot of their pursuit. A lot of the thing that drives celebrities' pursuits is to be a somebody, to be seen, to be understood, to be recognized, because they feel unseen, misunderstood, and unrecognized. They feel worse than, they don't feel like they belong. So they try to compensate of feeling less than human by being more than human and be the best in the world, famous. Everyone's going to see me. Then what happens when they get to the top? They end up addicted to drugs. They end up in all these dysfunctional situations, drug abuse, serious mental health issues. So many of them end up in rehab. Why? Because it was the pursuit of feeling I'm finally going to be better than, I'm finally going to be superhuman, I'm finally going to be recognized and feel like I belong. But when they get to the top, just like when I got to the top, the same fear, insecurities, and deep shame that they feel, the deep self-judgment, deep embarrassment they feel for who they are, isn't solved by the external pursuit or realization of a goal and being in the public eye. In fact, they feel more alone, because that thing that was keeping them going, this excitement of being a somebody, hasn't changed the inherent feeling of feeling like a nobody. And then they're confronted with the pain, because they're no longer under the illusion or the fantasy that it's going to change by succeeding at that high level. And that's where all the pain comes up, and they try to subside the pain. Like initially they might do more movies, more hit songs, more money or more like winning more Super Bowls or being an even better player of sport. But then when that stops working, to mask the pain, they turn to drugs, or they turn to bulk spending, or so that's what happens. They try to become superhuman as one way to escape the pain of feeling inherently worse than, less than human. And the other form of seeking the relief, which is something that no one consciously intends, but the second way that people with toxic shame attempt to seek relief to the pain of feeling like there's something wrong with them, is by perpetuating the infliction of trauma that they experience to them onto somebody else. And this is one that is very non-politically correct. It may be triggering to hear me explain this, but I promise you it is 100% accurate and backed up by evidence of hundreds and hundreds of people that I've seen, coached, supported. And this is the closeted aspect of shame that people don't understand, pay attention to. And this is the thing that holds people with toxic shame captive, is that the way that they were traumatized, they inflict to other people. They inherit the abusive tendencies, the traumatizing behaviors that happen to them, and they pass it on to others. This happens with sexual abuse, happens with physical abuse, happens with mental abuse, it happens with very specifically from grandparent, great-grandparent to grandparent to father to son or mother, daughter. It gets inherited through the family. And this is, if someone's sexually abused, it doesn't make any sense for that person consciously, who's had so much pain come from that sexual abuse, to want to pass it on to someone else. There's just consciously no way. Everyone on the planet's well-meaning. Everyone is well-meaning at the core. But a lot of the time, when someone's like hurt people that are hurt inflict pain on others. It's just a law of trauma. And I've seen it over and over again, and I do it. So I had a dad that was incredibly mentally abusive, emotionally abusive, super manipulative, and super controlling. And I copped the brunt of that. I was yelled at for hours and hours, daily for years and years and years. And it was the worst years of my whole life. I hated it. I hated it so much. It caused me so much pain. And of course, I don't want to be like my dad, but all my patterns in relationship just do the exact same things. It's the exact same way when I get triggered, or when I'm feeling, or when I get triggered, AKA a scenario in my relationship or life makes me feel super dysregulated, and the emotional pain starts to come up. So for example, if I hear someone chewing loud with their mouth open, it really triggers me, because when I was younger, my dad used to smash the table when someone did that. And so for me, there's so much pain associated to those noises. It's an anchor, it's a trigger. And if that happens at the dinner table now, I've actually done a lot of work on that trigger, so I don't get that triggered now. However, just let's pretend I do. If that happens to me and I get triggered, just as an example of one trigger, and got all this pain inside and it's all in me, then to escape that pain of feeling less than, that pain of feeling scared, of feeling less than human, I start becoming manipulative and controlling. I start becoming abusive mentally and emotionally to my partner, who I love dearly, and I don't want to be like that at all. I love her so much. I want to be the best partner in the world. I want to make her feel like the most special woman in the world. But what do I actually do? Start manipulating, judging, controlling. And it's the opposite of what I want to do, but I do it. And I've heard, seen, and unlimited cases of beautiful people that I would meet down the street, or I've known for years and connect with, and I love them, that have been sexually abused or physically abused. And then they've ended up doing the exact same behavior to other people. People, like, just imagine me. This hasn't happened, but just imagine I was sexually abused. I wasn't, but let's just imagine I was. And you found out that I had inappropriately touched somebody else. That would be, in society standards, so wrong, disgusting, burn them at the stake. And I haven't done that, and that's not my trauma. I spoke about mine, which is the manipulation, the control, the yelling, that kind of stuff, the aggression, the mentally and emotionally mainly. And I noticed those tendencies that I despise within my dad. I do it. I did it as like a manager when I ran my business. I was really controlling, manipulative, unrealistic standards, all the shit I hated about my dad. And I do it to others. And I do it in my relationship. And I hate that my dad treated my mom like that. And I hate that he treated me like that. And I fucking do it. How does it make any sense? I do not want to do that. It's the last thing I want to do. But I do it because it is inherited. Yeah. And I've done so much healing on it. So I do it less. I'm aware of it and I apologize when I do it. I catch myself when I do it. I'm in the process of supporting the part of me that feels less than human. So I don't do it, but I still do it. I still do it. And that is an example of how trauma is passed down from generation to generation to generation. And when someone's traumatized, they develop toxic shame. When they develop toxic shame, they feel less than human. They try to be superhuman, but they also involuntarily, they don't want to. I do not want to, but they involuntarily inflict the trauma on others that they experience themselves. That's how trauma is passed on. That's how trauma is passed on. When there is so much emotional pain inwards, again, hurt people, hurt other people, hurt people, hurt people. Someone's got so much pain inside. That is shame. Shame inside, it gets blame. Shame creates blame. Internalizing it causes it to get projected out and externalized. And so the shame epidemic, the problem of it is that most of the world, including the Western world, are riddled with shame. But because that shame makes us feel like we don't belong, this is the problem with it. It's a huge problem. It's such a tough problem to solve as well. I'm going to talk about the solution in this episode, but it's such a tough problem to solve because when someone feels less than human and they feel shameful, what does the little kid do when they feel embarrassed? They put their hands over their face and they hide. What do people do as adults when they feel toxic shame? Is that anything that incriminates them, they deny, they hide it away, they suppress, they closet it, and they've got all these unhealthy, shadowy ways of dealing with it. And then you have an entire culture, an entire society of people that are hiding the problems, but everyone's got them and everyone's hiding them. I'm exaggerating, but it's close to being accurate. Pretty much everyone in society has a bunch of toxic shame. Pretty much everyone and trauma and inflicts trauma on others and dysfunction and toxic behaviors. And pretty much everyone in society hides it. You're listening to this, and I know you've got your unhealthy behaviors. I know you've got your addictions. I know. Not because I've been stalking you, but because I'm just being around enough people that are super high functioning, that are super normal people that have all these problems. I haven't met anyone that doesn't. I've never met someone that doesn't have something. And so the problem is, and the reason this is an epidemic, it's not a shame epidemic, it's a toxic shame epidemic. And the reason it's an epidemic is because the fact that we're at a time where there's so much internalized pain, so much trauma, so many people feeling less than human and lacking a sense of belonging. But then we're in a culture where we're more visible than we've ever been. We're more visible than we've ever been. Being seen and being viewed, like there's people watching other people more than ever before. And so there's this thing where people want to hide more than ever before, but they're more visible than they've ever been. People are wanting to hide more than they ever have, but then they're also feeling more visible than they ever have. And so it causes inauthenticity. It causes political correctness. It causes controlling people's image, being controlled, people controlling the way the other people perceive them by only showing the light, manipulating the narrative of how other people view them. Social media is what I'm talking about here. And so people are putting all the light on social media and then they're hiding all the shadows. And then because, like I said, virtually everyone has all these shadows, virtually everyone has this shame, everyone has the unhealthy behaviors that come from the shame, the infliction of the trauma that happened to them, they're doing it on others. And then there's a bunch of addictive tendencies that are coming up to try to push down the pain as well. And then there's this trying to become better than human, superhuman, because they feel less than human. And there's these three big categories of dysfunction: re-inflicting the trauma, huge addictive tendencies, and trying to become superhuman and prove and inflate themselves because they feel so deflated as who they are. Those three big categories of dysfunction. But then we're in a situation where people are more visible than anything before, but shame has people want to hide. So what do we do in this society when we're feeling like all we want to do is hide, but we have to be visible? We wear masks. We wear masks. And so what you're seeing is when you go on social media, just saying mask, 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 mask. But because if someone's not feeling a sense of belonging, which most people are, feeling toxic shame and inherently less than human, and then they're saying mask, 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 do you think that will make you feel more human, more normal? No, because the perception through the lens of the person with the toxic shame, the perception that they've got when they see all these masks is, oh my gosh, all these people are doing so much better than me. They believe the masks because they already feel less than human. So they see everyone else and they're like, see, they're better than me. They're better than me. They're better than me. And it just keeps rubbing salt in the wound, salt in the wound, salt in the wound. So they wear a mask and they put all these inflated, fake, contorted stories online that have everyone else perceive that they are better than human because they feel worse than human. And the problem perpetuates. The problem continues. And I will tell you, you will be shocked at the level of shame and trauma that's out there in the world. When I'm saying virtually everyone, you'd be like, nah, not everyone. It's just the people that have lots of trauma that go to those healing events, and they're just like a small part of society, right? No, that's what you think, because every time you walk down the street and you see someone that looks normal, you perceive them to be better than you because you're feeling worse. So you think they're better, and you assume everyone's like that. And there's a globalized understanding that's fake and false in nature that normal people don't have problems. Everyone's relationship's healthier than mine. Everyone's doing better than me. Everyone's better looking than me. There's all these fake narratives because we're not seeing truth when we look online. We're seeing a manipulated image of what's actually going on behind the scenes. And it is a freaking problem. It is a freaking problem. Okay. So let me tell you, from going to, I'm going to say I've probably been to 100 seminars, workshops, probably more than that, seminars, workshops, retreats over the last 15 years. Okay. And I've seen hundreds and hundreds, probably over 1,000 people in their shame, in their trauma, speaking about what's going on beneath the surface. And if I had to guess, this is just my subjective guess from my exposure to lots of different types of personal development events. My guess is that 30% to 40%, 30 to 50% actually, of people have been sexually abused. I'm not just talking someone said something mean about their genitals, or they were abused because it was kind of, maybe they wanted to do it, maybe they didn't, and it ended up happening and that left them with this trauma. I'm talking about abuse, like blatant crossing of boundaries, most in childhood. That blows my mind. Because it didn't happen to me. I had my own fair share of different sorts of trauma. But because that didn't happen to me, I just assume it's not out there. But a lot of men as well, like 20 to 30% of men, in my experience of what I've witnessed being to these events and seeing people, hearing their stories, is that people that I've known for ages would never have thought that would happen to them. Boom, it's happened. And then the craziest thing is that then there's a very high percentage of those people that have then done their own equivalent to somebody else. And this is the sort of thing that if I spoke about this on the news, I would just get canceled. Because it's so incorrect politically that it would just be completely dismissed, because all this happens in the shadows. All of this happens in the shadows, which is the problem, because there's such a dissonance between what's showed to the world and what's happening behind closed doors. There's such a dissonance of what's happening in someone's life, in their pain, and what's actually happening in terms of what they show. What they actually show and what they do is completely different. It's an epidemic. Yeah. The other thing that's a huge factor with this is that a lot of people suppress their trauma. Like, I'll be honest, the more healing work that I've done, the safer my nervous system has felt to address things that actually happened to me, that I disguised, shut out, put to the side, hadn't thought about, and just essentially suppressed a bunch of these things, and just thought, yeah, the difficult upbringing, it's helped me be more successful, life's great. Yeah. But under the surface is this deeply hurting inner child, this younger version of me that did not feel okay. And that's the reason I'm pursuing success. That's the reason I want to be superhuman. That's the reason I have all these addictive tendencies. That's the reason that I try to control the narrative. That's the reason I bring manipulation and control into my relationship. Why? Because it's so easy in society just to push it to the side, because there isn't even the awareness of the trauma. Most people, a huge amount of people that I've worked with that have had sexual trauma didn't even know that it happened to them because they suppressed the memories. And then the more work that we did, the visuals started to come back and the memories started to come back, and they realized what had happened to them, and they couldn't even have access to them. But because to acknowledge that happened to them would be so emotionally painful that their nervous system feared, and their mind feared that they wouldn't be able to hold it. And it was probably true. So until someone gets to a certain level of emotional regulation and emotional maturity, a lot of the images and trauma isn't even remembered. So you have all these people in society that are aware of the trauma that has happened to them, that they internalize to mean that there's something wrong with them, aka they have toxic shame. Heaps of people that are aware of that and just hide it, and they try to overcompensate in society by becoming superhuman. The emotional pain that lingers underneath that they're completely disconnected from, but causes them to continue to sedate themselves with Netflix, scrolling, social media, emotionally eating, workaholics, gossips, all these different compensation strategies and compulsions to block out the pain. They're not aware of why this is happening, what's causing that. It's just suppressed. And so a lot of people won't address it if they don't even know it's there. But I can see it from a mile away. I can spot people now because I've done this long enough. I can see everyone's insecurities. I couldn't even see my own before. I was running a multi-million-dollar business thinking I was the shit. And it was a facade. I didn't even know that I was deeply insecure. Didn't even know. Yet I would walk in the room and just try to big note myself and find out what do you do? How successful are you? How old are you? And then I would just contrast it with myself. Am I younger and making more money and being making more impact? I would even call it more impact. But I thought I was confident. I was like, I can do this and that and that. And I was so emotionally disconnected, so inflated and ignorant of it that I couldn't even see my pain. And that describes most of society. And so with a lot of emotional awareness, this stuff becomes clear, but most people are disconnected from emotions. Why? Because their parents were disconnected from emotions and emotionally neglected them. Why? Because their grandparents were emotionally suppressed and neglected them emotionally, or abused them emotionally, or abused them physically and emotionally. Why? Because they had so much pain from going to war and seeing people be murdered in front of them that when they got back, there was no time to contrast with that and listen to little Jimmy's feelings when there were people being murdered in front of them, or they were trying to escape a war-torn country. The pain of that, the PTSD off the back end of that, the trauma off the back end of that minimizes basic trauma. And where a few generations past a lot of global wars and hardship and pain and deep ancestral trauma, we're like 3, 4, 5 generations past now. And now there's just been enough safety, even though there's been some weird stuff going on globally recently. For most people, fortunately, especially in the Western world, there's been enough space to start to look at and heal from this and deal with the causes of this and the trauma of this. And it's starting to come to the surface now. And so taking all of this awareness, because it's gold awareness. This is really powerful awareness, because if you're not aware, it owns you. If you don't have awareness that this is happening, then you're a complete victim to it, reactive to it. Yeah, if you don't know that you're feeling less than and trying to be more than, then you're just going to keep compensating and not actually get to connect with what you really want to do, what's authentic to you, because you're attached to all these compensation strategies. So the power of this and the solution to this is doing the deep inner work to connect to the part of you that was traumatized and feel what's going on. It's emotional healing work. I'm actually not going to go too deep into the solutions here. I'm just going to skim the surface layer way that the healing journey can unfold and what it can look like in different flavors. But ultimately, it comes by recreating a sense of unconditional love for ourselves that we didn't experience in the times we needed them as kids. When the kid's traumatized, when you were traumatized as a kid, or when I was traumatized as a kid, in those moments where I was being traumatized, I needed unconditional love and safety. What did I receive? Trauma, which I internalized to make it mean there's something wrong with me. And that belief is still ingrained deeply until I rewrite that script. I reassociate that emotional and energetic condition within myself. I recondition myself, my inner child, that fragmented part of my psyche that still lives on with emotional memories and charges connected to it. I re-love and reparent and recondition myself to know that I'm worthy of unconditional love by sitting in the depth of that pain and allow that to be drip fed to me over the years. Not trying to feel to heal, to desperately solve and change myself. And I've done so much growth and this is the next growth piece. But because I love myself enough that I know that I deserve to feel inherently valuable. Not better than, not worse than, but just lovable for who I am. And the moment that we can feel that within ourselves, that gets put out to the world. The moment that we feel that in ourselves, that we're unconditionally worthy of love, we automatically see the world and everyone in it as being unconditionally worthy of love. So the way to be a better partner, the way to be a better father or mother, the way to be a better sibling or friend, to be a better human being, participant in the world. And when I say better, I mean healthier, more loving. The way to do that is by learning to love ourselves. And that doesn't look like massages and selfies and quality time with yourself and journaling. Although they can be little symptoms, it looks like recognition of the condition of toxic shame primarily, and then sitting with ourselves lovingly when we are attempting to escape the pain. So you want to emotionally, if you know you're eating unhealthily and you don't want to, if you know you're scrolling and you don't want to, there's something that you're avoiding. And it is the emotional pain underneath. And as long as you're running from it, the cycle perpetuates. The only way to the other side of it is through. You can't skip around it. And I've learned this the hard way. I spend 40 minutes twice a day sitting with myself. It is difficult. It is agitating. It is debilitating. It is freaking difficult, and I resist it with everything in my body. All I want to do is just smash 10 kilos of chocolate. But I don't eat processed sugar because when I want to eat it, but I don't, and I sit with myself instead, I'm alchemizing some of the cause of this trauma. And I'm teaching the previous version of me, that beautiful, innocent version of me, that I am worthy of love. Because now I have the chance to sit with myself. It was when I was a kid and there was no one to sit with me there when I was being obliterated, yelled at, and abused, neglected. There was no one to sit with me because they didn't have the capacity, not because they didn't want to. My dad didn't want to yell at me. He didn't want to get yelled at and demolished by his dad, my grandpa. He didn't want that. And he certainly didn't want to do the same thing that my grandpa did to him, to me. He did not want to inflict that pain. But he did, because he didn't have the capacity to escape the pain within himself. Why? Because he didn't sit with it. He avoided it with drugs because it was too painful to confront, and he didn't have the resources and tools. The awareness. We're spreading the awareness. If you're listening to this, you have the awareness, and things are changing. Times are changing. The world is waking up. And by that means, if you're in a comatose state, a sedation, if you are sleeping and unaware of the ways in which you're trying to escape your pain, if you're riddled with toxic shame, but just think you're a functional human, but you can't see the ways you're escaping, running, avoiding, sedating, then you're asleep. And so when I say the world's waking up, it's becoming aware of the patterns, aware of the trauma. And that's what causes the infliction of pain that you don't want to do. That's what causes the dissonance between your desires and your actions. The toxic shame, feeling less than human, feeling like you don't belong, like there's something wrong with you. You get to recode that, rewrite that piece by piece over a very gentle and patient journey of learning to love yourself again. And this is not that's not the functional, hey, what do I do? Sit in the awareness of what I shared before seeking an answer. Give yourself permission to sit with what I've said. Let it simmer. Witness the way it plays out in your life. Look at your addictive strategies. What do? Do you control, sedate? Do you scroll social media? Do you spend a lot of time watching Facebook, Netflix? And do you spend a lot of time watching porn? Do you compensate with that? And is that a compulsion? Are you constantly working and busy all the time? Are you sleeping in? Are you doing drugs, smoking? Is coffee a way that you shift your nervous system to avoid the pain and constantly top yourself back up? What is it for you? I'll be aware of those strategies. And what are the ways that you behave in life towards others that go against what you truly want in your heart? Yeah, maybe you're feeling loved by your partner and you just can't hold it. So it triggers you, it frustrates you. You just try to control them and change them. And maybe you keep rescuing people. Maybe you are yelling at people and you don't want to. Maybe you're judging people or gossiping. You don't want to. You just want to love them. You can't help it because it's a way to deflect from the pain inside. Just become aware. Just become aware. And then the moment that that awareness starts coming in, that's the seed to the transformation. And that's the start of the journey of unlocking what life's really about, which is fulfillment, having the highest quality experience of life, feeling like you don't belong, and feeling hyper-vigilant in fight or flight, overstress on the nervous system, constantly running, constantly sedating. That's not a way to live. That's not a way to live. And so if you're a coach or a thought leader of some kind, and what I'm saying here is resonating, good on you. Beautiful karma. You're at a point now where you can start to excavate and explore this within yourself. Because, like I said, if someone feels embarrassed to be them, they don't want to show themselves to the world. They want to hide away. And then you end up with all these masks online that reinforce the belief, and like people's insecurities bite on it, go, see, everyone's doing so well and I'm doing crap. And so your ability to show vulnerability, authenticity, and just be real is a symptom of the healing of the toxic shame. Being able to speak out there publicly what you've done to others or what's been done to you. Choose a safe environment, a safe group. But the reason that I do lives online and Facebook is not just to support other people to feel safe to share their own trauma and their own shame, but it's so I can be like, I can heal it, because shame heals in the light. But we want to keep it in the shadows because we're afraid if people find out this, they find out that I did this, they find out that this happened to me, if they find out that I've got these, my genitals look like this, I did this to this person once, I had this trauma happen to me, this abuse happened to me, they find this out, that I was bankrupt in the past, or I broke the law in this way, people find out that about me, I already feel like I don't belong. I already feel like I should be embarrassed to be myself. If they find out this, I'm going to be exiled from the tribe. It's just going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back, and I can't risk that. I'm already unworthy enough. I'm already unworthy enough. So an ode to the emotional journey, not just trying to solve it and heal it. You can do a breath work and you can learn to get in touch with your feelings, but just being able to sit with yourself in the time that you need, unlike you were and what you didn't receive in the times you needed it from your parents. Maybe you received the opposite. You needed presence, love, and attention, and you received a slap in the face, or someone took advantage of you and broke your boundaries sexually and betrayed you, you have the chance to rewrite that slowly, patiently, gently over time. But that's the shame epidemic. And it's a real pickle because it causes people to want to hide more and put more masks up, which perpetuate it. And the way through it is awareness. This podcast, doing the work yourself, being an example of vulnerability and sharing your imperfections and your trauma and the dysfunctional ways you show up in the world, just to normalize it and humanize other people, allow people to accept their humanity. So that is the end. And my suggestion to you is come to the Art of Courage workshop. We explore this, being able to feel and heal. Even though I said we don't want to feel too healed to change, but being able to feel, it takes a lot of courage. It's an aspect that I cover at the Art of Courage workshop, alongside big action steps on your purpose, alongside the courage to let go, alongside the courage to express yourself and be authentic in the world. Free yourself, actualize your dreams, develop financial abundance. It will change your life, and all you need to do is say yes. All you need to do is say yes. DM me about it. I promise you it'll change your life. And I do one-to-one coaching. Usually the people that hire me are quite advanced coaches or people that have a lot of wisdom that want to grow their coaching business, but also don't have people to hold space for them. They're always holding space for everyone else. And I come in and can see the blind spots and hold them with unconditional love and a lot of strength to work through the things that are the blind spots underneath that are causing the dysfunction, are causing an incongruence between who they want to be and how they're showing up. And so if you want to work with me one-to-one, please hit me up, ryanmagic.com. Send me an email, ryan@ryanmagic.com, or reach out to me on Instagram @theryanmagic. If this resonates with you, please share it with your friends. I love you guys to bits, and I can't wait to see you in the next episode. Peace.